Yo, welcome back to the next episode of the This Week in Overwatch League podcast with your boy ATP. We have officially reached the end of the regular season qualifiers. It's done. The West just finished up. We're basically just waiting on play-ins next week, and then for the East to finish up their knockouts so that they can get into play-ins as well. We're in the final stretch here. We had some pretty fun Overwatch in the previous weekend to look back at. There weren't a ton of games that seemed like they were going to be good, but we ended up getting a bit more bang for a buck than I thought we would. So let's just dive straight into this because there's a lot to discuss. Make sure to subscribe and check out the other podcast videos if you haven't already. So first, I kind of wanted to start out East. Usually I do West first because it's just generally like, the more important region. It's the better region. No offense, East enjoyers. But I think that they had the more interesting results overall, for better or worse. The place to start for sure has got to be O2 Blast versus Soul Infernal. Because if you missed it, O2 Blast defeated Soul Infernal, aka the most dominant team out east, the most dominant Overwatch League team that has pretty much won every single game they've played out in that region, lost to a contenders team. Now, mind you, said contenders team has looked really good in this new meta, but damn, that is tough. And it definitely makes Dynasty and Dragons fans feel a lot better. Well, no, actually, no, Dragons didn't play it too, but Dynasty fans feel a lot better at the very least. And I suppose Dragons fans copium for also losing to a contenders team. Like, hey, even the best team can lose to contenders teams in our region. So I guess Dragons and Dynasty copium's going to be through the roof right now. But honestly, O2 kind of just had Infernal's number in this one. I don't really know how else to explain it. They were just the better team in this series, and it's one of the first times in a long time where I've really seen Infernal on the back foot. Probably not since their loss to Dallas literally at like the start of the summer. That was probably the last time they've looked this shaky. They did their best, but it seemed like O2 always had an answer for whatever they threw at them, and it's largely in part because of how dominant they look on their comfort picks. This meta is just really good for them. It's a right place, right time kind of deal. Protect on the Junker Queen has looked fantastic. Who argues Genji is still legendary? Genuinely just might be the best Genji in Overwatch history at this point. I don't know how else you could explain it with how good he's looked. Prophet, Baby Prophet, PH, whatever you want to call him, former Dynasty Hitscan, looks way better, looks like a completely different person because he's no longer stuck in that Sombra jail. His Sojourn has been excellent. He looks super happy. Even Lee Soo-min getting to play that Kiriko has been super beneficial as well. They're just in their realm of comfort. They're taking advantage of what was given to them. Out east, this Queen stuff is super relevant, and they're absolutely making the most of it. It seems like most of their guys are capable of some pretty good playmaking potential. They're in a good spot right now. And it got to the point where they were able to beat the best team in this region, at least from like a record standpoint, right? Infernal have beaten down so many teams this season. It's been so easy for them. But now that some teams are feeling a bit more comfortable, and it's not just about being the better Sombra team, Infernal showed some weakness, and O2 capitalized on it. They were just the better Overwatch team. I don't even think Infernal necessarily played, horribly. There were some moments where they could have played better. Oasis was a bit shaky, and Esperanza, they were off to, a really bad start on that map. It took an enormous comeback just to make it competitive. But for the most part, I just think O2 had a really good game, and they're demanding more and more respect as the weeks go by. It's just like at the, the spring knockouts. It's the same thing. O2 looked really good then. They pushed Infernal at that point. They lost to them during that time. But this time they get the job done, even though they have a completely different roster. It is astronomically different, and they're still finding a way to get it done. That's just the type of franchise that O2 Blast is, though. They really are Overwatch League caliber, and I don't really think I can have any more doubts about that. It's a little embarrassing for Infernal and Overwatch League representation, but O2 have been consistently good throughout the years. They've scrimmed OWL teams. They were a big part of why 2021 Shanghai was able to stay sharp over there, because they were constantly scrimming against O2 with people like Proper and whatnot. But they just have it figured out there. I don't know if it's like who's in charge, the coaching, but they always seem to get the most out of their players. Anyone who knows like NFL or NBA, they're kind of like the Greg Popovich, San Antonio Spurs, or Bill Belichick Patriots dynasty kind of thing. That's the kind of vibes they give off with their consistency and their ability to make anybody fit their system and play well and find their potential. To a certain extent, they've definitely gotten lucky with the meta, because beforehand they were absolutely trash at the Sombra stuff. There's no denying that. But credit goes where it's due. Even though the meta is going good for them, they still had to take care of business against a very solid Infernal team for Eastern standards. So really good on them for pulling this off. It is absolutely insane what run they're going on, causing chaos at the last possible moment over there in the East, when everything for the most part seemed like it was all figured out. O2 Blast have entered the picture. For a long time, it was like, okay, maybe Dreamers could potentially go on like a miracle run and be the tier 2 team that disrupts everything and makes playoffs. But, well, I don't want to make it sound stupid, but their dream has come to an end, and O2 Blast has swooped in to give all those chaos lovers a new look on life by beating Infernal and now having a chance to actually make the playoffs. Now, be it's not a very high chance, but this has opened the door. By beating Soul Infernal and making it to the grand finals of their bracket, it has opened up the door for a contenders team to make the Overwatch League playoffs this year. There's actually a very helpful graphic made by Mr. Zedis on Twitter. You may have seen his YouTube videos as well. He's a great creator. Definitely check him out. But he made a little helpful chart here. I don't know how well you can see it, but basically, to explain it simply, if O2 want to make playoffs, for one, they've got to win their side of the bracket, which is doable. I mean, they beat Infernal. They can literally beat anyone over there now. That is for sure. But also, and here comes the hard part, Infernal need to lose to Soul Dynasty in losers finals if they want to have any kind of chance. That's like the first condition. There's other things, but that's the big thing, right? Making sure that Soul Infernal lose to the Soul Dynasty. So Dynasty fans, even though you can't make the playoffs automatically and have to do it through play-ins, you can always ruin your big brother, so to speak's day by making sure that they can't make it either. You have the opportunity to do the funniest thing ever by kind of ending the regular season exactly how it started by randomly stunning Soul Infernal. How funny would it be if they pull it off? Like, I just can't, man. I also saw someone on my Twitter say I can smell another second place brewing, which I thought was hilarious, just because it seems to be never ending with Infernal/Philly and that quote-unquote legacy they have. But yeah, that's the first thing that needs to happen. Infernal have to choke massively, and I don't really know if it's going to happen. Anything's possible in the East, but Dynasty haven't exactly been impressive. They just barely beat Sin Priza over the weekend. So I wouldn't hold my breath if I'm an O2 supporter, or I guess Infernal hater, if that's what you want to call yourself. But also on top of it, I think Dallas also need to have like certain things happen, because Spark are going to get in. I'm pretty sure they already punched their ticket by beating the Fuel, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But they're going to need Dallas to go to a loss to Poker Face, I think, if I remember correctly. Oh, wait, no, actually, no. I think if O2 get first place, and then if Dallas lose to Spark in the grand finals, like even if they beat Poker Face, but then lose to Spark in grand finals, then O2 technically should have the better average placement because they got a first and a third. Dallas would have 2 seconds, so I think that would work out in their favor if the math adds up there. Or they could just have Dallas lose to Poker Face. That could work too. So yeah, O2, albeit a small chance, have a kind of chance here. There's a little bit of a Jover odds thing here, which I thought was funny. It's like 90% Jover for them. It doesn't seem likely, but boy would it be funny. And in a way, an insult to OWL fans, because again, as cool some of these contenders teams are, and as good as some of them are, and you know, as talented as they are, the OWL teams losing a spot to them would be super embarrassing and would only warrant people to laugh at this region even further. So in a way, I'm kind of rooting for the East teams to do well, but I also want O2 to make it, because like if we had Spark Infernal and O2, let's say, or like Spark, Dallas, and O2, whoever it might be. That'd be pretty interesting. It'd be pretty funny to see O2 blast in front of all those fans in Toronto. Like, no one knows who they are for the most part, but here they are. And then, like, they somehow, like, beat some more OWL teams. That could cause some pretty good chaos. So, honestly, either way, most people would be pretty satisfied. So, yeah, that's kind of where O2 is at. I'm a little upset with Soul Infernal, and I'm a little worried about them. They should be fine, though. It's not looking like they'll lose to Dynasty, but if there's anyone who can find a way to choke, it's probably them. So Philly/Infernal fans, I wish you the best of luck there. So let's move on now. We're going to move up into the Spark Dallas game that I just mentioned previously. And it did not go the way that I expected. I want to just formally apologize to Spark fans before I take a deeper dive into this and say that I made the same mistake again, and y'all have all the rights in the world to roast me and make fun of me and say that I'm a trash predictor and a Spark doubter or hater, whatever you want to say, because I went back on my word. I told y'all heading into the knockouts, I was going with Spark no matter what. Nothing was going to change that. I always make the mistake of doubting them in tournament scenarios, and they prove me wrong. This time I'm not going to. But then I saw that shiny new toy. Dallas Fuel, Junker Queen, it just seemed like a match made in heaven. They had it figured out. They'd be comfortable like the Sparkle Genji and Symmetra as well, if necessary. It just looked good for them. The Bliss Lucio, lots of good stuff, lots of good qualities, plus just the Hanbin carry is like a giga buff, or at least it should be. But Spark came in with a plan, and I regret changing my mind because of it. I had doubts about how their dive comp could do against Junker Queen, because they just played a lot of dive the week beforehand. But I guess they had some strats in mind, or they had been practicing recently, because Gushue, he really beat all of those one-trick allegations this weekend. I mean, maybe it's just a one-time thing, but he looked well prepared in this one, and genuinely, he outplayed Hanbin on his Junker Queen, even to the point where Hanbin was like, this ain't working, we gotta swap over to like Orisa and stuff, you know, like it got that bad. And he did a little bit of everything. He brought out that surprise Doom Fist on Lijiang that worked very effectively. Not something I could say that I was expecting. A Gushue Doom out of nowhere, and like it was like mildly successful, not even mildly successful, super effective, was pretty crazy. But then he also went on to the Orisa, and he did very solid on that. And then he also played a little bit of Monkey as well. He just did everything in this series, which is not something that you see often with a guy like Gushue. We're used to him just being the Winston guy. He comes in clutch when the Spark need him to, and like the playoffs, absolutely pops off. But he's doing a bit more than that. And that's really awesome for Spark fans, and that gives you some confidence, maybe if the meta stays this way, that they can be versatile enough to do some damage in Toronto, because it is confirmed they're going there because of their average placement. They're chilling. They're all set. Good for them. They've been clutch all season whenever they need to. But yeah, I'm actually really liking where Spark are at right now. And I promise you, no matter who they're playing this weekend, I'm picking them to win. I'm sorry, Spark fans. I know y'all will never forgive me at this point. But, yeah, they wanted to give them some respect for playing as well as they did. Dallas just had no answers. Like, Lijiang was a super close first map. But after that, it was all Spark for the rest of the series, really. They had Dallas Fuel's number for sure. I really like how they played. And I liked how flexible they looked, which is not something we've seen a lot of from them this year. They've shown lots of different looks. Their DPS looks super happy. Spark are in a really great place, and I'm super excited to watch them in Toronto to potentially pull off an upset or two, just like how they did against the Mayhem in the midseason madness. As for Dallas, they need Infernal to do badly. I think that is the way that they get in. They need Infernal to do badly, and then O2 to like choke and like get second against Dynasty or something like that. I'm pretty sure that's how they'd get in. I think that's the only way. At least that I can think of. It's not looking too good for Dallas though, because they lost this game to the Spark. I mean, unless the Spark lose to them, I don't know if that opens anything up. Like if Dallas can get first, maybe there's a chance. Like the tiebreakers are weird with that kind of stuff, but generally it seems more like with how they're playing right now that they're going to be moving into the play-ins, which sucks. They'll probably be the favorites, especially if like Infernal make it. But I I'm kind of sad for Dallas fans. It seemed like they had a chance to avoid that altogether, and you never know what might happen because, again, it's like at any given week kind of thing. You'd expect them to beat like Dynasty, Dragons, Charge, no problem at all, really, but you never know, and that's kind of scary in a way because there is a chance, there is a world where Dallas could become the first defending champion to not make the playoffs. Like, even some of the early teams, like even the 2018 Spitfire going to 2019 made playoffs. So that'd be pretty sad if they broke that trend, if you kind of know what I'm saying. Speaking of the Dragons, I wanted to move into them real quick, super quickly. It's not like that big of a deal. I don't know if anyone's really surprised at this point, but they lost to Sin Priza, SBG, for a third time in a row. They are 0-3 against SBG this season, and every time they've played them has been in a tournament scenario. They lost to them once in midseason, and now twice in the Summer Showdown. This time they played better. It was a closer series, but in the end, it just wasn't enough. It started off strong on Peninsula, you lose two, you start trading, but then they kind of went out with a fizzle on Route 66. It was a super sad way to end the series, I'm not gonna lie to you. It's super embarrassing that they lose to this team for a third time, that they still can't figure it out. You're the OWL team, and you can't beat this friggin' Contenders team that, mind you, wasn't even good enough to be a part of the summer qualifiers. Like, they had to get in through the open bracket just to get here. You lost to one of the lowest seeded teams. The Dragons had one of the worst performances of any of the teams throughout both tournaments out east. One of the worst average placements. It's like bottom 2 or bottom 3, whatever it is. It's not promising though. Even some of these meh Contenders teams that you don't care about have done better than them. But in a way, I'm kind of glad that Sin Priza won, because definitely the more entertaining and interesting team in this tournament. I talked about it last week, but I'm loving Milguru. That guy's awesome. Their DPS are promising as well. There's a lot of good stuff going on for Sin Priza right now. It's sad that it ended with that close loss to Dynasty, but hey, Dragons may not have even put up that kind of fight against Dynasty. I mean, maybe they could have. They've had their number all year. But Sin Priza winning might have been the best possible timeline in terms of results. They were a super fun team. They're competitive in like all their games, and you can't ask for more. Nobody was expecting them to make it through these knockouts, but for what they did, it's super impressive, and I think they can all give themselves a pat on the back for making it this far and for being competitive against even some pretty solid Eastern teams like Soul Infernal. So good on them. Really awesome stuff. Dragons, though, super disappointed in you, and no one is going to be surprised if you end up getting rolled in the play-in tournament. You're going to be there for sure. I mean, for better or for worse, you'll be there. You have a guaranteed spot there, but I don't know how you're going to do. Things don't look good unless you make some massive improvements at the last possible second. And for their sake, I hope they do. Viper and Hisu, they deserve way better than this. Especially Hisu. That guy's been through the ringer with some other mid teams. I mean, he played on Toronto Defiant, for crying out loud. Give this guy a break. Give this guy an actual team. Like, please, for the love of God. But my expectations are not that high, and I'm sure you guys are probably in the same boat for those of you who watch the Dragons in the APAC region. Outside of that, though, I think that's pretty much all I have to say on the East. Like, Dynasty and SBG had a close game, but it's whatever. I think most people thought it'd be a good game, and that Dynasty would probably win it, or, you know, it could be a 50-50. So we'll move into the West now. I think that kind of concludes my Eastern thoughts for the video, at least until later. So now we're going to move into Gladiators in Boston, because sadly, Glads fans, your team has been eliminated from play-in / playoff contention. It is a GG with this 3-0 loss to the LA Gladiators, or to the Boston Uprising, excuse me, LA Gladiators. With this 3-0 loss to the Boston Uprising, the Los Angeles Gladiators are going to be stuck in 11th place. That's it for them. It is a done deal. 11th for them, 6-9 record on the season, -12 map differential. Absolutely atrocious season for them. Really, really embarrassing way to go out. They lost like 7 of their last 8 games to end the season, like 7 of their 8 summer qualifying games, with their lone win coming against New York Excelsior. They got reverse swept twice throughout this process to the Valiant and New York, which are two super beatable teams, especially Valiant. There's just no excuse to ever be losing to those guys. You made all these changes, all these panic moves, and it just did not pan out for you. And I kind of feel bad for the Gladiators and their fans. This was a monumental collapse. There was one point where they were 5-3 this year, and they finished 6-9. That is so sad to go out like that. Or no, not 6-9, 6-10. They didn't update this. Why does this say 6-9 still? This should be 6-10. Someone needs to get fired. Just kidding. But 6-10 is what I meant to say. I was saying that for some reason the math wasn't adding up there. So yeah, they finished 6-10 with -15 map differential, I believe this should be. Just really sad stuff for them, and I feel bad for Glad's fans because it seemed like you were capable of a lot more with the Mayhem, beating them a couple times this year, getting super close to making it to Korea at the midway mark. Things were going so right for you, and then they immediately went all wrong. It's like this team lost all of their morale and confidence the moment that Dante was gone. I'm not going to say that Dante's the sole reason they went downhill. I think it was a catalyst more than anything else, but there's certainly some blame that goes into it. I'll admit that. I just think that it's a little unfair to say that it's like Dante/Marvel that's like solely responsible for this. I can agree that maybe if they had Dante here, things could have gone a bit differently. Maybe they'd at least make play-ins. They probably don't choke that game to Valiant at the very least. And if that happens, they're going to make it in because Justice did lose their game to Toronto Defiant, which we'll talk about in a bit. But, that's a would've, could've, should've kind of thing. In reality, though, there's other problems that went into it. The Marvel adjustment period was rough, but also support was a problem. I think people need to look at that a bit more, especially in this Boston series. It was very apparent with how much Cal was getting picked off first, or like Funny Astro. Most of the time, Cal, he was dying a lot. They were just not on the same page as him. I don't know what was going on there, but he was constantly getting destroyed. He was getting feasted on by the Boston DPS. He had absolutely zero chance to make any kind of impact, and I think part of it is just them missing Lastro there. Or even Babel, I don't know what happened to him, but mostly missing Lastro, who was a very respectable flex support for about half of the season before he dropped off the face of the earth and decided to take a break for like mental reasons, I believe it was. Can't blame him for that. But without him, again, they were suffering. That's another big playmaker that was huge for them. It was like Kevster, Lastro, and Dante's the leaders of this team, right? And now, all of a sudden, two of them get thrown away. You're left with just Kevster to try and carry the load, with a lot of other issues going on, like with DPS aside from Kevster being a nightmare in the Sombra meta. I think that's another thing that goes into it, right? Like, there's so much responsibility just on Kev to carry this team. Even when they were, like, a solid team, it felt that way. Yaki and Kai just weren't of any use. Yaki, the only time he even looked remotely good was when he was playing the Tracer, and that wasn't often because you have Kevster. Why in God's name would you have Kevster not be the one on Tracer? It just doesn't make any sense. Like, I feel bad for Yaki. Supposedly he's cursed, and in a way I kind of agree because he's lost a lot, but he needed to play a lot better. His Sombra was so up and down this season, and I feel like it goes underlooked because people love Yaki a lot and they just want to defend him to the end of the earth. But the truth of the matter is, him and Kai were part of the problem as well. Kai didn't look remotely comfortable until like a couple of weeks ago for the most part. He had some good games here and there, but again, mostly in this type of setup, it just wasn't meant for him or for Yaki, and they really suffered because of it. There was like 3 core problems, plus maybe some coaching stuff as well on top of it. It just seemed like there was a blame game going on, and they had to make too many changes way too fast. It all adds up in the end. You can sit there and blame them not having Dante all you want, but clearly there were some other underlying issues going on that also led to their demise. Don't just blame poor Marvel. Don't do it. He did the best he could, and in the last couple of weeks, he definitely looked a lot better and a lot more comfortable. This is just a total team collapse in every way, shape, and form, with Kevster trying his best to drag that team kicking and screaming. Like, really. It's just super sad to see Kev go out this way. Kevster not even being in the play-ins is an actual tragedy. Gladiators were like the one team outside of like the top guys that you were expecting to at least be in play-ins, right? I don't know if anyone was expecting them to be a real contender, punch up to the weight of Rain or Mayhem, let's say. But I think a lot of us thought they'd be in the thick of it as one of those dark horse teams, right? they had the talent to make it work. We saw flashes in the Pro-Am. I know it's just mid-season, but they showed that they're capable. And even in the first half of the season, they showed a lot of the same. They had some competitive games here and there, but you expected them to at least be in play-ins, even if they were just okay. I think that's the big shocker here, that they were the team to be joining the freaking Valiant and Vegas Eternal at the bottom of the standings. It just doesn't seem right. Gladiators haven't been this bad ever. Literally. This is the first time in franchise history they've ever been this low. This is the first time ever that they've missed the play-ins/playoffs as well. Like, that's how consistent they've been. They've always been willing to spend money and have these big teams, and they found success, and they were well coached. But then it all went downhill this year with the guard and not having all that stuff, an uncertain future, all these changes and these struggles. It all added up, leading to a very sad demise that never should have happened to begin with. They should be ahead of people like London, New York, and Washington. It's ridiculous that they're not. It just doesn't make any sense. And really, because of the way they're going out, we may not actually think of the Gladiators all that highly. Because, yes, they had a couple of tournament wins and stuff, but they were never super relevant in the playoffs. And now what we're going to remember them for in the Overwatch 2 era is looking really good at the start, then fumbling it all away in the second half, and then this year becoming an actually awful team, and then having it be your last season probably, whether it's because the league ends or because your team is not going to exist anymore. For one reason or another, this is probably the last time we're ever going to see the LA Gladiators as a franchise. They're going to be the next Chengdu. The Guard literally are bailing from their esports scene. Just remember that. The last game that you ever saw the Gladiators play in was a 3-0 loss to Boston where they got eliminated. That is the legacy they're going to leave behind in the end. That is the last game that you'll ever see of the Gladiators, most likely, I'd say. What an awful way to go out, man, truly. And I'm probably going to rant and roast them a bit further down the line. Them and the Charge probably need like a dedicated video to how they just had some of the worst midseason collapses in the history of this league, but that'll be for another day. I've rambled on about Gladiators enough, so let's move into the Toronto Defiant and Washington Justice series. Overall, it didn't mean that much because Gladiators losing beforehand essentially meant that this game wouldn't do much for Defiant, outside of maybe bumping up their seeding if they beat Toronto. I think that's about the only way that they'd benefit. But mostly this game was just whatever. Both of these guys are in the play-ins no matter what. They can try if they want to, but it's not going to make a groundbreaking difference. The only difference is Justice now are locked into a bottom 2 seed in the West knockouts, which means that if they lose in that first game, it's one and done. You really don't want to lose that one. If you at least win the first one, you're in a double elimination bracket, which we'll look at a bit later. But it's a kind of scary situation, I guess, to lose that one. It does have some impact behind it. You'd expect them to beat New York, I'd say. But it is kind of scary nonetheless, because it is a week-by-week kind of thing where you never really know. But yeah, they lost this one. It was a pretty interesting series, a pretty close series, I'd like to add as well. Justice definitely gave Defiant some hell. Defiant have apparently been one of the better teams in scrims, so to see the Justice do this well is a pretty good sign for them, and it makes you confident they could probably make a somewhat deep run in the play-in tournament starting next week. It started off a little interesting on Antarctic Peninsula, but then they fought back on Eichenwald, even giving Majed and that backline some trouble. alexyOWL was going absolutely crazy throughout this entire series. Him and Floor looked good, Floor and the Hanzo, but alexyOWL especially in that Genji. It's actually insane that he wasn't an MVP candidate the more I think about it. He was absolutely insane in this series. He's been doing this stuff all year, but on his signature Genji, he was really popping off. He gave all of the Defiant some big-time trouble. Even when the Justice were losing some of these maps, he was miraculously turning around fights all by himself. That's what it felt like. But in the end, it didn't matter because Toronto are just the more confident team in this meta. This slow play style really benefits them. Kaluj not on Monkey is super great for them. He feels a lot more comfortable. They tried to match with like this funny strat with the Flex God mirror going onto Alari, but it just didn't work against Majed. Majed is probably the best Alari in the league right now, so that kind of backfired. And the Ben best Orisa, probably not as strong as the Mirror Orisa as well, for being honest. But they gave it their best shot. It's just Defiant are very strong in this kind of meta, and I think only the better teams in the league are going to actually have a chance of pulling it off against them and putting them in their place. They just seem like they know what they're doing here. So no shade to the Justice for losing this one. Honestly, they should feel proud for playing as good as they did, in my honest opinion. But with this win for Toronto Defiant chat, I'm not live, but you know what I mean. With this win for Toronto Defiant, they have become perfectly mid. They did perhaps the most fitting thing for a franchise I've ever seen. With a 3-1 victory, as you can see up top here, against the Washington Justice, they go 8-8 on the season with a 0 map differential. Like, literally, the definition of mediocre, of middling. They have not done anything above or below average. Average in every way, 8-8. Literally, same amount of wins as losses, same amount of map wins as map losses. It's so perfect. The most mid franchise we have does the most mid thing possible, the most mid record you could actually have. Now, if they had this roster currently that we see, this second iteration for the whole season, you'd have to assume they'd do better. They'd probably have a positive record and a positive map differential. I just find it funny how it somehow keeps happening to them. Like, the last 3 years have pretty much been the same thing if you've been watching for that long. And I mean that quite literally. Look at this. Look at this and tell me I'm wrong. This was made by Overwatch League Statistical Insights. I don't know how, I think you can see this pretty well. I'll zoom in a little bit. But Toronto, the last 3 years, 2021, 9-7, 0 map differential. 2022, 12-12, -1 map differential. This year now, 8-8 with a 0 map differential. In the last 3 seasons, they have accumulated a -1 map differential, the last 3 seasons combined. How much more mid could you possibly be? It is insane. I mean, no offense to Defiant fans. I just think you guys could attest, right? That's why I bring this up. You guys would probably agree to me. It's literally part of the experience at this point. No matter the roster, no matter the season, the era, it's the same thing. Either trash or, in the case of like 2019 or 2020, painfully I messed that up. I botched that. Trash in 2019 and 2020, or painfully average in the other years, excuse me. Now, to be fair, I think this year could be different. I think this roster looks damn good right now, especially if the meta holds up. I think they have a chance to go relatively far. Like I was saying before, Kaluj looks really good on the SIG and on the Orisa. Hydron and Spectra are doing their thing, and Majed's Alari is crazy. Something that is maybe getting underlooked a little bit right now, just because there's a lot of exciting pieces on this Defiant team. But damn, I can see now why RuPaul said that he's the #1 Alari. This man owned the Justice. He lived in their heads rent-free. I'll put some gameplay on here if you missed it. He did everything right. He dominated. He diffed the Justice. He diffed Teru. And he diffed Mirror. All these guys. It just wasn't even close. What was I going to say? They just look and feel like a new team. I think that Majed has brought in a lot of life to them. Just a bit more explosiveness in that back line, a bit more playmaking potential. And this is a lot of what we were hoping to see if we got a double flex meta or a composition that would work for them in that kind of regard. UV and Sir Majed just sounded like it would be really good, and it definitely has been. Ultraviolet's super consistent. Majed has the crazy mechanics. Like, this is a really good Alari stat line, and he's definitely the best we have in the league right now until proven otherwise. I like that they're consistently incorporating the new hero into their strategy. They're like the only team doing that right now. She's clearly not that good, but Defiant are finding a way to make it work, and apparently they're one of the better teams in the league right now, at least from like a scrim standpoint. Now, slow style like this, I think, could get punished down the line, But you got to do what you got to do. If it works, then why change anything, you know? They look really good, and I think as a result of this late push in getting hot at the right time, which is usually really important in the Overwatch League historically, I think they just might make the playoffs because of it, much to the delight of their home Toronto crowd. Like, on LAN, they could play in front of the home crowd. In the playoffs, mind you. Like, that sounds really cool. And I'm kind of hoping that it happens. Like, really, really good on Toronto Defiant for playing really good to end the season, for being patient and finally finding their meta, even if it did come at the cost of some of their brothers, so to speak, like OG and Speedily. Really good stuff from them. And also good stuff from Justice. I like how they played again. But speaking of the Justice, they actually had a little bit of controversy after this game. It's not like the hugest deal in the world, but Getamazed, their head coach, came out with a tweet that has been kind of under fire by the general public. If you missed it, he said, "We don't deserve shit. Disgusting mistakes, insulting performance towards the people that support us." This is some very strong wording. I think that's the problem that most people have, right? This just ain't it. I think even the GM of London was saying something about it. Not in this tweet, but she replied to him in a different one. Noki, I think her name is. Whatever it is, however you pronounce it. She was saying that, it's just not appropriate. And I agree. He kind of deserves to be under fire for this. I'm not saying that it's like completely unwarranted, as everyone gets emotional, especially in a mentally taxing competitive league like this. I think being frustrated and having these emotions is understandable. It's just the way that he went about it that is the problem. That a lot of people are kind of saying, like, yikes, get a grip, as said here. Like, you can't be saying stuff like that. Disgusting, insulting, we don't deserve this. It's an insulting performance towards the people that support us. It doesn't do you any good. I understand you wanted to lose this game, or you wanted to win this game, excuse me, they did lose it. You wanted to win this game, you felt like you could do it, and you came up short of your own expectations, but you gotta keep it under check, Have these things go on in your mind. You don't have to tweet these things, or X these things? I don't even know what you'd say at this point, but you get the idea. Going to social media and using such strong wording doesn't really do you any good. It paints you and your team in a negative light. It makes people question you and, the player mentality. Do they even like playing for you at this point? It just creates a lot of unnecessary drama and attention when you really don't need it. The play-ins start next weekend. They have a game in 5 days at the time of this recording on Monday. And mind you, this is the most important game of their season. It literally could be their season ending. Everything is on the line. If they lose to New York, it's not double elimination in that first round. They're out of there if they lose. Genuinely, it is all over. It is a one and done in that first round to decide who plays. I think it's Toronto Defiant. So doing this is just not the greatest. I'm sure the players won't mind. I know the players respect him for sure. Everything's pretty chill over there. But it does paint you in a negative light, and it brings some negative attention. And as Nike Joggers here is saying, it could give you less morale. And I agree with that. To a certain extent, I think it can bother you, even if it may end up being over-exaggerated. Again, I get it. I get that you're upset. Everyone has the right to be upset and to express emotion, but you gotta go about it in a smarter way and just use some different words. How do you think that makes the players feel? I don't even want to imagine, to any of them who actually pay attention to this stuff, insulting performance to the people that support us. That's just going too far. Way, way too far. And you deserve some criticism for it. Maybe some people have gone over the top in the replies somewhere, I bet. But I can understand why he is under fire for this. So hopefully this doesn't end up backfiring and they play well enough to at least make it through the New York game. If they lose, I'm telling you, people are going to come back to this tweet. It may not necessarily be his fault, but people are going to blame him. They're going to. It's going to happen. There's going to be some upset Washington fans if they lose that game. So for his sake and for his team's sake, I hope that they can focus up and get the job done against a New York team that they should probably defeat. There's no guarantee, but for their sake, I hope that they pull it off. So moving on, let's talk about the London Spitfire versus Houston Outlaws game. I'm going to try and bring up some gameplay from time to time, but the only reason I want to talk about this game, I mean, it's mostly not important because Houston and London both didn't really have to try, and I'm pretty sure they both didn't try, if I remember correctly. But the reason I'm bringing it up is because London once again have choked. They've choked another super winnable game down the drain, but they really had in the palm of their hands. I don't know how they always manage to do this, but it seems like whenever they have an opportunity to do something great or to win a game easily, they just throw it away like trash. They always find ways to choke these fights in maps that you know they should be taking. There's scenarios where it feels like they should be 3-0ing teams, but they end up losing due to their own incompetence and poorly timed mistakes. There were so many in this series. It's just been a constant theme of the London Spitfire this year. When they are performing poorly and when they're losing, just constantly losing fights and advantages that they should not. Like this one here, Antarctic Peninsula, they have a chance to close out the map, mind you, right? They're using beat. All they need to do is win this fight and it's over. You use beat. Shu's gonna die here. They're gonna get another kill as well, I believe, if I remember correctly. Yeah, okay, so they kill Violet. Fearless is gonna get nailed here as well. Like, he jumps and gets absolutely murdered. Boom, absolutely hilarious. So now they're down all these people, right? Shu has to scramble back to the point as Lucio, Violet's dead, Fearless is dead, Pelican is low HP. All you gotta do is clean it up, man, and it's over. You even got the Simmel as well, and they throw this fight away. Somehow Landon dies here, the EMP kills him. They end up losing this fight. You know, Outlaws players come back, there goes the Blade. It's like, that's fight number one of many in this series where this just always seems to happen. I believe later in this map it happened again, actually. Yeah, 99%, right? 99 to what at one point? 99 to 44. Okay, so 99 to 44%. I don't know if... Okay, so you're going to have a Shatter in the next fight. You have Window. You have all these resources coming up. And they end up losing yet again. It's like crazy that it keeps happening. Houston had some resources too here, of course. But it's just crazy. You had the lead, and you blow it again. The Nano Blade kind of ruins you, and that's it. Just all these blown leads is an actual tragedy. Shatter missed. It's crazy. And then there's some other maps too. I don't think it's Midtown. I'm pretty sure they win Midtown. It's this one. New Junk City. This is like the other big one. They go up 2-0 in this one, okay? They go up 2-0. They're winning this convincingly, I believe. If I remember correctly, it's 2-0, right? Yeah, so it's 2-0. It's like, oh, you lose one to them, it's fine, it's fine. London end up playing super well on this point. They're doing great. They even get it up to 99 again. Okay, so it's another 99 to whatever percentage. This time it's 99-0. Houston are using all the resources. You just gotta do a bit of an economy push. You're gonna have your EMP, your Shatter. Things are looking good. Houston don't have much to work with. All you gotta do is just execute a good EMP and it's over. Backbone just needs to hit a big one, hit a fat one. They still are just barely about to come up on ults. Just push the tempo and go. Use EMP, do something, move in. They're playing super slow though. They're pushing out an ult from Happy. Nothing happens. They're still going slow. It feels like there was only friggin' one fight. It feels like they took this entire time to do one fight. Like literally. They're just waiting, being so patient. Not trying to make anything happen. Like there's nothing going on in the kill feed. No one's dying right now. Absolutely no one. They're just waiting and waiting and waiting. And in the time that you probably could have taken 2 fights, you take 1 for this entire round and you end up losing it. And things get even worse too, I believe, on this final point. I'm pretty sure London are in a scenario where they probably could have taken this point and they just don't. I think they have what, like a bunch of ultimates here and they still lose. Like Sparker's about to get his, Admiral, Landon, Hottie. They have all these ults and they just can't do anything. They're just throwing them away. It's insane. I think it was the previous one that I was talking about that was like the worst. But it's stuff like this though that I always can't have total confidence in London. This is why people doubt them. Like, as good as they've been, as fun as they've been to watch this season, it just feels like at the big moments where they really have a chance to prove themselves and take that next step and show some consistency, show some dominance, where they end up losing for literally zero reason. There's absolutely zero reason why they lose this series, I feel like. There's just no excuse. Antarctic Peninsula and New Junk City were both yours. Like, you literally got reverse swept on New Junk City. You were up 2-0, and you even had a big lead on another point, and you still lose it. I just don't know how they keep managing to do so. It's something that's happened so many times this season. Like, I'm sure London fans could tell you better than anyone else, where they're always losing these fights where you just say to yourself, how did we lose that? We had so many ults. What were we doing? What were we waiting for? Why did we use our ults like this? Why didn't we use this ult at this time? It's always happening to them. And that's part of why I'm kind of worried about them heading into play-ins against some of the top level teams. They're not going to get away with beating the Valiant twice and the Vegas Eternal and the Gladiators, the trash Gladiators. You're not going to have that this time. You're playing some legitimate teams. Like Shock, you've proven you can beat them, but they're a bit different than the last time you played them. We're going to talk about the Shock in just a moment or two, by the way. But, like, how do you expect this to work against Boston, let's say, or like Toronto or Vancouver? I don't see how they're going to pull this off if they keep making these pivotal mistakes. And we know London love to choke in tournament scenarios. We saw it in Mid-Season Madness last year and the Summer Showdown against Florida. They got reverse swept by them a few times. They're so bad at closing. They're so bad at closing and with the execution and stuff, and it really bugs me. And that's like their critical flaw. They play so well as a team, but then some moments they just have these bad mental lapses. And they've got to figure this out quick, man. They really do. Or I promise you they're not getting through play-ins. They have a legitimate chance, but with what they showed me against Houston, even if they weren't necessarily totally trying, you got to finish the job. Because, again, it's happened so many other times this season. Cool on Houston, though, for making, like, one of my only predictions of the season come true. Not that it really matters, but shout out to them, I guess. Funny enough. That's kind of my thoughts on the London-Houston series, though. Kind of worried about London. Excited about them, but also major concerns that kind of make me turn away from them in terms of being one of the favorites to win play-ins. I hope they do because they're super fun, but my hopes are not super high, London fans. So let's talk about this Shock and Rain game now, because this one kind of drew some attention. It didn't really mean that much, I feel like, but the Rain really got pushed in this one. Shock made them earn every single inch, every single map. They were giving them hell. Like Numbani, it's a 4-3, goes to extra rounds, and the Shock almost reverse sweep in the process. They fizzled out on Route 66, kind of a sad end to the series, but the in-betweens, like the middle maps, were all crazy close and crazy intense. I mean, Shock friggin' 3-0'd them on the new game mode, Flashpoint. I think that Proper and Probe looked really good in this one. They found some big-time picks. It wasn't just Proper. Probe did a lot of good stuff as well. I think they're starting to figure something out as a duo over there. Probe looks more and more comfortable by the week. Or I think his name's Probe, but I like just to say Probe. But he looks more and more comfortable. He looks happy to be at the Shock facility now, no longer on high ping and on Sombra. And I think they both shared a lot of the responsibility in the series, though, which is great. That's exactly what the Shock and Proper have been looking for. Just knowing how lucky Proper has been with, like, good help at DPS this year, that's really great. Also, on top of it, I think that Max seems to be fitting in a bit more with the rest of the crew. He finally looks comfortable. Looks like the guy that we saw in Contenders last year. He's showing the potential. His Queen and his Sig have put in the work recently, and I like what I'm seeing from him, and I'm pretty happy as well. He's been the butt of basically everyone's jokes the last couple of months with the low win rate meme and everything, so it's good to see him figuring it out literally when his team needs him the most. That is a great sign for him and the San Francisco Shock. Genuinely, I thought they clicked in this series. It wasn't perfect. Again, I think some of those early and late maps were a bit shaky, but they found a way to stay in this series, and they showed some mental resilience, which is something we have not seen a lot of from this group this year, by almost getting a reverse sweep. It took a huge day out of Lip and Stalker to put these guys to bed, And it's probably the best I've seen the Shock look against a top team, maybe this entire year. Now, with that said, their performance does come with some criticisms, right? For one, I think there's maybe some questions about how hard the Reign were trying. I think that is largely up for interpretation. On one hand, they were trying to get the 1 seed, but two, it felt a bit more casual from their perspective. Maybe I'm wrong there, maybe because Hawk was there. I don't know what it was, but something maybe felt a little off. And also on top of that, I think that Shock, again, were a bit shaky and had their own issues. Fighting against play-in teams with their lives on the line, I think could feel a lot different than this Reign situation where losing really doesn't affect them too much. But also, there may be a main support problem with the Shock. I don't know, maybe things will change because the meta, by the time playoffs come, could feel different, but the relevance of Lucio might end up being the bane of their existence. When I watched back that Shock game, Renko had his fair share of mistakes, at least in the early portions of the series. His lack of experience on Lucio really showed. I think a lot of his beat timings were just not where they needed to be. Chio's were infinitely better. Some of his beats were kind of costing Shock's ability to win a fight or to stay in a fight, to sustain in a fight. I don't think it's all his fault. I mean, Renko's literally a flex support. He hasn't been playing with the team much these last couple of weeks. Honestly, the last month, it's mostly just been Luke Mino. I'm just saying that the lack of experience at this position, whether it be Luke or him, could end up costing the Shock a deep run at the title, or of at least just being relevant, if this meta stays how it is right now. I think there are some potential Lucio concerns. Maybe they will go away with time, but this kind of stuff, especially this late into the season, can be hard to teach, so it's an uphill battle if you're a Shock fan. And like, again, on top of it, they still haven't exactly beaten any great teams this year. Like, who's the best team they've even defeated? Like, Toronto before they were good? Like, I'm just not that interested in them yet, even though they almost beat Reign. There's a chance they might go on a run just because they have the talent and they're motivated to improve, they have proper, but the lack of success is not very captivating, at least for now. But we'll see. Maybe a play-in run can change my mind, but right now my confidence in the Shock is probably the lowest it's been in a long time in terms of like a season-by-season basis, probably since 2018 in terms of the season as a whole. Like, if we're talking in recent weeks, probably the most confident I've been in them in a while. But nothing to write home about for sure. But we'll see how they do in the play-ins. It'll be interesting to see how they play against the London Spitfire. That'll be their first opponent. That's a good way to get some redemption and get off on the right foot. We'll see what happens, though. It'll be interesting to watch the Shock be in a do-or-die situation for sure. That'll show us the character they have, the type of team that they really are, and what their players are made of. That pretty much wraps up my thoughts, though, on the East and Western matches. Again, the West didn't have that much to look forward to. It was mostly just if Gladiators could beat Boston. That was the only way things could get super interesting in terms of the storyline. But, there was some other good stuff that happened. I didn't mention this NYXL Titans game, but that was fun, even though Titans didn't really care. You had the Gladiators Boston with stakes on it. Florida and Valiant had some fun things going on. Spark Dallas was awesome. O2 Infernal. The East really kicked butt this week, and I think day 2 of the West was also good. Just all in all, a pretty good weekend of Overwatch League. I'm satisfied despite not really having that much to look forward to coming into the weekend. So before we wrap up and look at the future and whatnot, let's get into our favorite segment of the week, ATP's Performers of the Week, where I pick an individual player from tank, DPS, and support that stood out to me, whether it be because they had a really good game or something else that just piques my interest that I wanted to shout them out for. First things first, we're going to start at tank with our guy, Gushue. I kind of brought it up before, so I'll be brief, but he definitely beat the Winston one-trick allocations with this performance today. This Doomfist really did come out of nowhere. I really did not know he had this in his arsenal, but it was causing a lot of trouble for the Dallas Fuel. It disrupted their Bastion Symmetra comp a ton. It got a lot of value, even punching Hanbin off the map and stuff. It was a great performance out of him. And then later in the series, after Li Zhang, if it would move along here, goes on to the Orisa. Finds value on this hero as well. Has some good moments where he sets up a big play for Pineapple and whatnot. Even breaks out the Doom again. Like, there was a lot of stuff going on for Gushue in this series. Doom, Monkey, Orisa, a little bit of everything from him. A very balanced approach from a player that we're not used to really seeing be balanced. And it got to the point where Dallas were panicking and playing Moira. And we all know that's their go-to fallback comp when things are not going well for them. Aside from that, we'll move on to Fitz. I just mentioned before, Titans and NYXL had a good game. It didn't mean that much, but for New York, it definitely did. Because in a world where Gladiators did beat Boston and New York lost this, they could actually be out of play-in contention. But our guy Fitz made sure that it never got to that situation. He made sure that this New York team could control their own destiny. He said, hey, listen here, buddy. The Dynasty and I, we've been through a lot. We've been on playoff runs. I'm going to the play-ins bare minimum. This guy had himself a day. Early on, Titans were giving them hell. It was a struggle. But in the second half of this series, Fitz was on a mission with this Sojourn. He played angry. Probably the best performance I've seen from him this season. Maybe outside of like that one Somber game from like a couple of weeks ago. But mostly, this is probably the best I've seen him play since last year. Just an absolutely cracked game. He was diffing Heesang after he was putting in the work for a while in that series. Like, him and Heesang had a pretty good back and forth, but Fitz got the best of him. Even got the crutches in the background, poor guy. But he's pumped. He had a ridiculous series. You know, with everything on the line, NYXL trying to clinch a play-in berth in a pressure-filled map 5, and he took over the series, and he was the closer. So much love to Fitz for having a great game and showing us why he is still more than talented enough to be in this league and why he is definitely not overrated. And last late support, I'm going with a wild card, baby. We're going with Liar and Faith. Why exactly? Because they both played DPS as main supports, which I could be wrong, but from like a legitimate game standpoint, it might have been the first time we've seen main supports play DPS, or one of the only times in recent memory, bare minimum. Remind me if there's any other times down in the comments below where a main support swapped the DPS. It's not often that we see a main support off-roll like this outside of like a flex support hero. Liar was maybe a little unhonorable, because I believe in chat in the previous map, he told Checkmate we should both do Ryan 1v1, but then he freaking broke out DPS instead. Now, I don't mind it. It was still hilarious. This was a meme-filled map. Seeing Checkmate play friggin' Ryan again, getting his redemption arc, finally putting the dark past from 2 years ago behind him where he was forced on to tank on this Florida team. As I say that, he dies. But, like, generally, he did pretty all right. So that was cool. Like, it kind of forced that. It also forced someone to play freaking Genji, which was really cool. But, like, Liar played Mystery Heroes. They played, like, Genji and Torb and stuff. And then our guy, Faith, like, Titans out of left field, putting Lenny on the Alari and then Faith on the Bastion was super funny. It might have costed them this map, if I'm being honest with you, but, like, damn. Way to do it for the memes, guys. Way to do it for the memes. I don't think either of them were very successful in their efforts and their endeavors to change their career path. But it was fun at least, right? I don't think anybody had a Faith Bastion and a Liar DPS roulette on their bingo card, so pretty cool stuff. And a great way to make games that otherwise may have not been that good a bit more entertaining. It didn't work out for them in the end, but I can appreciate the silliness. I most certainly can. This might have actually been like history in the making. I don't think main supports have off-rolled in 2 separate games ever in like the same weekend, let alone in general. So that was pretty fun. I loved it. I loved every second of it. Sometimes you need some funny stuff like this to lighten up the mood and to make things just a bit more entertaining. So with that, the week comes to a close. Regular season is donezo, and what could be our last season together. Now it's all about finishing up the Eastern knockouts for one, and starting the Western play-ins, which will begin at the start of next weekend on September 9th. Let's look at those Western play-in matches, shall we? I'll do some in-depth predictions as I always do in the future, but generally, like I was saying before, in an elimination round to decide who plays Toronto in the double elimination bracket, NYXL are going to play the Washington Justice. We're going to see if those Getamazed comments end up cursing them or not. You'd expect Justice to be favored, but I'm not going to count out New York completely. That should be a fun one to watch. Literally, one of these 2 seasons is going to end. Also, London play the San Francisco Shock. Shock maybe could get some revenge, or London could prevail with their Rhine comms as always. This is going to show us what the Shock and the Spitfire are both made of. It'll be a good indicator of where they stand, and if they have any kind of chance of making it through. Then Toronto will await Justice or New York. They'd probably be either of those guys. And you can't see it on the screen. They didn't add it, but awaiting these guys in winners round 2 will be Boston and the Vancouver Titans. They both got a first round bye for being the 4 and 5 seeds respectively. I don't know how the math works out there. I think it might depend on who ends up winning these games, but Boston and Vancouver have a potential advantage. I don't know how much it's going to mean for Vancouver necessarily. They don't look that good in this meta, but Boston could have a pretty easy path to just make it through. They only have to win like 2 games, I think, right? They just have to win winners round 2 and then winners round 3, and then they could be in. Or Vancouver or one of these other teams. You know, that's the easiest path to just get through the top bracket and not have to go through this crazy bottom. It'll be a team from the top bracket that makes it to the playoffs, and then a team from the bottom. That's how it's going to go. Winners round 3 winner, and then losers round 4 winner will join the Houston Outlaws, Florida Mayhem, and Atlanta Reign in Toronto later this September. It should be really fun. I think some of these games are going to be extremely entertaining. No more Valiant, no more Vegas, no more Gladiators. More of the fun teams, which is good. That's what we're looking for. Out east, which might be even more entertaining if certain things happen, the Spark will be awaiting the Dallas Fuel or Poker Face, who ended up beating Dreamers, which is, good for them. I'm glad. It doesn't mean anything for them in the end. They can't make the playoffs, but there's a chance they could at least send Dallas packing, which would make sure that they go to the play-ins and have absolutely no chance of qualifying for that other playoff spot alongside the Spark. And then in bracket B, we're left with the Soul Bowl, and then the winner of that playing O2 Blast. It'd be interesting if Infernal got a run back with O2 and they beat them. I don't know for sure if that'll happen, but that'd be cool. Maybe even Dynasty, and then a world where Dynasty beat Infernal, that would be absolutely insane. Because 1, it screws Infernal potentially out of making the playoffs automatically. But 2, we could see the Dynasty lose to O2 Blast for a 3rd time. Imagine how funny that'd be if they lose to these guys again. If they lose to Prophet for a 3rd time this season after releasing him, and then they lose to Lee Soo-min for a 2nd time after releasing him. Man, Dynasty fans probably are so pissed that these guys are doing well without them. It's kind of a timing thing, mostly, because, at the time it made sense, those guys weren't contributing in the meta. But literally after they release them, the meta changes exactly to what they need to be effective players. What are the odds of that, man? I feel bad for Dynasty fans. I bet they feel stupid and also really, really upset at the same time. I'm sure they're happy for those guys at least a little bit, but it's probably hey, why couldn't you have done this for us, man? Why couldn't we have had this meta then? Maybe we could have been a better, more consistent, more respectable team this year. But hey, maybe they could get their revenge. I wouldn't get my hopes up, but you never know. It's a any given weekend type of thing, especially out east. It'll be fun to see who O2 ends up playing, even though it's likely Soul Infernal. That's pretty much it though, guys. That kind of sums up how I thought about the weekend and what to look forward to this week. I do hope that you enjoyed this episode of the This Week in Overwatch League podcast. If you enjoyed it and you want to stay up to date with the series and all of my other Overwatch League content, I'd appreciate it if you could give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you're new. And also check out the playlist if you haven't already. It's got all of the episodes on it. If you want to listen to me ramble off and be a goofball for the better part of 7, 8, 9 hours, whatever it is at this point. But yeah, love you guys. Appreciate you guys staying until the very end. Hope you have a good one, and I will catch you in the next video. Peace.